Good afternoon. First, I'd like to begin by introducing myself. As you can see, I'm not Sandy Baker. She's far more prettier than I am, but unfortunately, she's under the weather today. So my name is Mark Dengler, and I'll be hitting for Sandy. Today, we're going to be talking about healthy employees and a healthy workplace. More often than not, when folks begin the wellness journey, they really want to focus heavily on employees and making sure that their employees are doing healthy activities. But they often forget the most critical, important aspect of a healthy employee is really the workplace environment itself, the attitude and the culture that's available. And so part of what I'd like to share with you is some tips about how to evaluate your existing employee workplace culture. Is interestingly, many companies focus on customer and customer satisfaction. And what they're really hoping to do, obviously, is to optimize that customer satisfaction. But they don't always realize the direct connection between happy employees really mean happy customers. If the employees are not happy, there is no way that the customers are ultimately going to be happy. They will feel the residual resentment sometimes that employees can have. So it's really important to begin and recognize the role that happy employees make in overall creating not only the right environment, but also to ultimately creating happy customers. So I'm going to focus on attitudinal health, and I'm going to talk to you about how it really needs to be regularly measured. And moreover, I'm going to talk to you about what are some of the key ways to get it started. Many employers are afraid sometimes to do employee surveys, which is really what we're going to be talking about. And it's because they many times are fearful of what they'll hear. They're fearful that it'll set expectations. But what I'd like to really mention is that I think it's more important that you reach out and engage the employee than it is to ignore the issue and just not ask the employees or validate their opinions. So we really believe strongly that employee satisfaction surveys are an excellent way to engage employees and to build a strong, healthy, cohesive, and productive workforce. Real quickly, I'm going to tell you a little bit about RMS. We are a full-service market research firm based in Baldwinsville. We actually have 4 divisions. We have an analytics team. We have RMS Healthcare. About 50% of our business is healthcare. We do patient satisfaction surveys. We're a CAHPS approved vendor through CMS. We also do a fair amount of research and education, banking and finance, and as well as retail and hospitality. Our team includes highly skilled analytical staff, state-of-the-art data center known as QualiSite, as well as a fully vetted panel of individuals who live and work primarily in Central New York. We have about 3,500 people who like to take surveys. They like to share their opinions. They are ready to very quickly give you input. So I just want to give you a little bit of a background of where we come from. We do employee satisfaction surveys, but today is not about selling you having RMS do an employee satisfaction survey. It's about talking about why an employee satisfaction survey is so important. So just want to close with just giving you a sense of some of our clients. We do a lot of work nationally. The beauty of the internet and being able to do so much work over the internet is that we don't always have to travel. We can work with some very, very large clients and never have to leave our backyard. But it's always rewarding when we can work locally. All right, so I really just want to take a minute and reiterate that a healthy employee equals a happy employee, and a happy employee really means a healthy business. And that what companies really need to focus on is they have to take a comprehensive look at their culture. They need to look at the environment that they're creating, and they need to understand that culture, and they need to seek to engage employees in a very synergistic fashion. And I want to give you a little example, and that is, if I asked you to hold your finger out and spin it clockwise, all right, and look down at that finger, let's pretend you're the company and you're looking down and you're doing everything right, you're spinning it clockwise, and that's just what you want to do. But people's perception and perspectives are different. I want you to do that same spinning, only I want you to raise your hand above your head, and now I want you to look at how your finger's going. Are you still going clockwise? No. It's actually, the perception is you're doing the opposite. Now you're going counterclockwise. And the point is that you have to, when we talk about healthy employees and employee engagement, you have to look at the workplace from the employee's perspective, not from the employer's perspective or from the corporate management perspective. And we tend to get focused and stuck into only looking at it from the corporate perspective and forget that the employees see things very differently. In fact, many times employers who attempt to do something believe that they're addressing the issue the right way, but it doesn't always play the same way with the employees. So that's something that what we really want to focus on is talk about how and what tools you can use to engage those employees so that they're constantly giving you feedback and that they really are part of creating the culture that they work in. And these are just a couple of stats, and I won't go over all of them, but some of the key ones are that really companies that have engaged employees, they outperform their competition by 202%. In fact, from a revenue perspective, if you are truly working in an environment where the employees are engaged, they typically earn 2.5 times the amount of revenue that a company where the employees would argue they're not engaged earn. So it really, there's an immediate payback to engaging employees and getting them involved. In fact, employees who aren't engaged often not only are productive, but they often leave the company. And that obviously creates turnover, and that's a tough thing for companies to deal with, to find the right individual. You've already invested in those employees. It's far better to work and make sure that those employees are happy and productive than it is to go out and create new. In fact, almost $11 billion a year is lost in employee turnover. So I'm going to share with you the employee engagement scale. And there are different points around this, but how do you, and I think you probably can all either relate to this yourself or you can think of employees that you know who fall into this. A fully engaged employee you know, because they put in the extra time. They really demonstrate a positive attitude. They commit to the bottom line. They're productive. Most importantly, oftentimes what you hear from a fully engaged employee is you hear something called passion. They have passion for what they're doing. They feel valued, and they really feel that they're making a difference. On the other end of the continuum, you have folks who are disengaged. And those are typically people who are silent or they're negative. Sometimes they're destructive, and their silence can be destructive. They just don't participate in things. They completely isolate themselves. And they often come off with a sense of being of mistrust. And that sense of mistrust is they mistrust the company, but in reality, other employees who know that they're disengaged sometimes mistrust them as well. So what we really want to do is try and move the employees all the way down to becoming fully engaged. Certainly partially engaged employees are folks who are really looking more, not so much at tasks, but they're looking at outcomes, and they're looking at why is their work being done, what's it producing. They do the work and then they get paid, but they don't need to necessarily be told what to do. They obviously feel that they want to, they know what to do. So engaged employees clearly feel valued. Here are just a copy of some of the, how do you know you're dealing with engaged employee? Well, they'll say things like, I have a best friend at work, or I have the materials and equipment I need to do my job, or I know what's expected of me. At work, my opinions count. They listen to me. There's someone who encourages my development. And all of those comments indicate that the employee is committed. Moreover, it indicates that the employee is engaged, that they want to provide input into the work environment. They want to share their opinions and expectations. So I want to ask, have either of you folks have done an employee satisfaction survey where you work?
I think the last one that we did was 2 or 3 years ago, I believe it was.
Okay.
So we haven't done one recently.
And was there a reason, was there a trigger that started that?
If there was, I was not privy to that. All I know is that we did it.
Okay.
So I do not know specifically the answer to that question.
And just one more question on that. And was that the first one that was ever done, or prior to a couple of years ago, were they doing them regularly?
No to the regular. I do know that they had done one probably 4 or 5 years before that.
Okay.
Because people referred to it. It was kind of before I was there. So, but they weren't done regularly. I do know that.
Okay. Well, and that's interesting. I mean, in just a second, I'm going to share with you a process, but one of the key things in that process is that it is indeed a cycle and a continuum. And certainly you could go maybe more than a year out, maybe go every 2 years, but to go 5 years and then do nothing and then do it again,
right,
you're not going to get the value of that. So how about you?
Our company has not done one.
Never done one? Okay. Are you considering doing one? Have they ever talked about it?
We've talked about it, yeah. We're
Yeah.
a smaller company. We're only like 43.
Sure, yeah. Really, any company more than 5 employees should be doing a survey of some type. I know it's, and the reason that you want to, you don't go lower than 5 is because you do try to have a little bit of anonymity, and so certainly 43 would allow for some, for survey results to be anonymous. But so the cycle that we really want to focus on, and this is true with anything. I mean, we're talking today all about health and a healthy workplace, is that you want to first measure. You want to measure things like awareness, alignment, determine benchmarking what the culture really is, and then you want to go out and obtain feedback, and then you want to analyze that feedback. You want to act on that feedback, and then you want to refine and then measure again. So this whole cycle of measuring, analyzing, acting, and refining is indeed a process, and it's a process that certainly can be done over a number of years, but it's something that needs to always be going on. It can't just stop and start. You can't do it once and then so I will tell you that most companies don't do satisfaction surveys, and really there's 5 key reasons why they don't do it, and these are truly all things that have been said by employers as to why they don't. But obviously, one of the main reasons is that the employees are afraid, or the employers are afraid to hear from their employees. They're afraid to hear bad results. They don't want to hear that, they're not wonderful. They think that if they come off as not being perfect, that's going to somehow impact the company. But and I'm going to tell you in a minute that's obviously not the case. The other reason that they don't do them is because they fear that the survey is a promise. That if somebody identifies something, then just the fact that the employer is doing a survey is kind of a subtle promise that they're going to improve things. As an employer, we can't set unrealistic expectations. What if I can't address what the survey finds? The third reason is that expense is often a concern. They think that the survey is expensive. And then on the other hand, they go, if they want to minimize the expense, they try and do the survey in-house. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. That is absolutely the wrong way to do an employee satisfaction survey. That is not perceived well by employees. If you're going to move into employee satisfaction surveying, you really need a third party to be involved. The fourth reason that people don't do surveys is because many of the employers feel that their employees really are indifferent. They don't care. It's just a job to them. And And that's a fundamental issue. You can never really move forward with developing a healthy culture unless you really recognize that most employees don't view their job as just a job. We're at that job for many, many hours a day. And that employees don't just care about the money. They really care about the community and the sense of value that they have when they're at work. And then the last reason that many employers don't do surveys is that it's just not on their radar screen. They're focusing on customer satisfaction or making money or making widgets, or and the work environment is secondary. And I hope if you take away anything from today's little talk is that if you really want to embrace a healthy workplace, you need to start with the workplace environment itself. And obviously my message is you can't afford not to listen to your employees. Your employees are a critical component of what the organization does. And oddly enough, the act of doing the survey, just the ask, is a form of engagement, and you will get a positive reaction to just being asked to be part of the survey. So I will tell you the value of surveys, and I'm going to talk about it from two perspectives. The first perspective I'm going to talk about is the company perspective. Why should you survey your employees? And from the company perspective, and I think we probably can put all that together pretty quickly, is that it obviously is a means to engage employees. It builds loyalty and commitment. And again, we talked about turnover rates. It is far, far less expensive for an organization to maintain and cultivate an existing employee than it is to have to replace that employee. In fact, it typically costs 1.5 times that employee's salary to replace them. So if you've got a high turnover rate, that's something that needs to be looked at right away. It also allows for organizational effectiveness. If you do employee surveys and you share the results, what typically happens is those results get different departments that may typically work together. There may be some synergies. They all of a sudden feel some empathy, and they get them all aligned, and it allows for corporate alignment. Obviously, it drives customer satisfaction. I opened by mentioning that a happy employee really means a happy customer. And anyone who thinks that they can fix customer satisfaction by not looking at the satisfaction of their employees, they're missing the boat. It won't last long term. And lastly, as a couple of slides ago, the reason that you want to do employee satisfaction surveys is because engaged employees produce 2.5 times the revenue of non-engaged employee companies. So that fact alone, if you're focused on profitability, should drive companies to take a look at it. They really do produce better. Now, from an employee perspective, the key thing with a satisfaction survey is that when an employee is asked to participate in a survey, it actually starts the groundwork for creating the right culture, because it means that the company cares about them. The company is showing concern. The company is asking for the employee's opinion. So there's value right out of the gate with that. Now that is a bit double-edged, because you can't do it once every 5 years and not do it again. Once you start the journey, and it is a journey, you need to stay on that journey, and you need to continue on the cycle. But again, it's proven time and time again that those companies that regularly do employee satisfaction surveys generally create a much healthier culture going forward. It's also a way for the employees to have a voice. Anytime employees don't know how to share their thoughts and their opinions, but a survey gives them a formal way to do that, they know that somebody's going to look at it. It may not be the right person, but it's a way for them to get a voice. It also allows employees to, at least it sets the expectation with employees. Not so much that the problem will be fixed, because it may be a problem that may take a long time to be addressed, but what it does is it sets the expectation with the employee that there will be an action plan, that it will be addressed. So the key thing with an employee satisfaction survey is the company does need to be committed to attempting to rectify or align issues that come up out of the survey that don't appear out of whack. And also, companies that do employee satisfaction surveys, if they're that concerned with understanding the impression of their employees, they're obviously sure that their employees stay involved in the company, and it gives the employees the perspective that they have a career path, that they're not just in a job, that this company wants to retain its employees, so there's direct organizational growth commitment. And that also ties into the fact that from an employee perspective, when you get involved with employee satisfaction surveys, they do want to see the dial move. So that first survey that most companies do, that is typically a benchmark survey. And it's going to basically lay out where we are today. And then based on the findings, there should be a group of individuals or a subcommittee that actually look at action plans. But all in all, the point with this whole surveying and measuring is it's a way to begin to build the right, healthy culture in the workplace. So, all right, I'm going to start here and say, what's it going to take? What's involved in employee satisfaction surveys? And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the term leadership. It really takes getting buy-in and commitment, primarily from senior leadership. It takes relevance. You have to measure what's important. It involves partnership because it gets everyone to participate. It actually involves design, and that you can customize the questions. I'm going to talk in a few minutes about some of the questions you may want to put in. You have to execute it and deliver it well. It's data-driven. You have to have someone who effectively evaluates and analyzes the results. Communication is key in conducting a good employee satisfaction survey. It helps spread the word. It also involves a good implementation schedule, and obviously it involves benchmarking so that you continue to measure. And really, employee satisfaction surveys can focus on topics, but there has to be some type of common ground. So sometimes companies will do an employee satisfaction survey if they've had a particular situation. In healthcare, there are times when we have to deal with a particular incident. There might have to be some realignment of employees. There may have to be a merger. There might be a layoff. And then many times companies will say, well, let's do an employee satisfaction now. We need to understand where everybody is. Or if companies come together and they form a new company, let's do a survey. And that's great to have some type of a reason to start it. But the reality is this employee satisfaction survey should be ongoing. There should be some common ground. You should always be looking at how well employees feel they know the company direction, how well they know the company's initiatives, how well do they know what their job is, how well do they have the tools to move forward. So, and the key thing with a satisfaction survey is that it gets the conversation started. It helps drive culture, and that it gets a conversation going. Many times companies don't realize how important it is to keep that conversation moving. Here's just kind of a little fun little cartoon about measuring your engagement. It starts off by saying, according to the anonymous online employee survey, you don't trust management. What's up with that? The point is if it's an online and anonymous, how could they be talking to anybody about whether accusing anyone of saying you raised it? Oh, right. So, but really, what this really points to is that companies should not be doing their own surveys. One of the key things with engaging employees and getting employees to feel to participate and be honest is that it needs to be done by a third party. And typically you want to do it with an organization that has done surveying before. But it's important to know that third party connection. So and I'm presuming your company did not use a third party when they did their survey.
Actually, I think they did.
They did, good. And that's wonderful, even if it's just a consultant from the area. As long as the employees know that information is not going directly to the human resource department, won't in any way get back to their direct supervisor or manager. There's really, that is the biggest barrier. Folks feel that they can't truly share their thoughts because it will come back to them. The other key thing with the survey is that many times when you work with a third party vendor, you're going to be able to get a better survey script. You don't want a lot of open ends in an employee satisfaction survey because the way people respond may tip off who that individual is. So, and again, you want to benchmark and you want to be able to identify whether you're moving in the right direction. So a good survey company will do a very nice job of putting together an instrument that can be used longitudinally over and over again, but also it will minimize the amount of open ends. Now, there should always be some open ends and allow people the opportunity to share their thoughts, but again, this whole issue of anonymity is a key one, a key driver going forward. And then lastly, you want to make sure that you get meaningful results. If an employer does the survey themselves, keeps it in-house, many times your response rate may be very low. You may not get responses from all key departments. Whereas if you work with a third-party vendor, what you're going to be able to get with that vendor is they can monitor the response rates. They can go back and build incentives to get more responses in certain departments or certain areas if they appear to be low. So before I move on to, I do want to talk about there's modalities, different modalities that folks can do with surveys. Obviously, the three general modalities, one would be a phone survey, and that would be where somebody would call the employee and do a phone survey directly over the phone. The great thing about that is it's interactive, it's two-way communication. It also allows for clarification, like sometimes somebody will say, well, work is too busy. And what you don't know is busy a good thing or a bad thing? Some people really like to be busy. They would go nuts if their work wasn't. So if you use a phone survey, then the person who's administering that survey can say, well, what do you mean by busy? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? The downside with a phone survey is, one, it's expensive, and two, it's hard to get to every employee, so you definitely work with a sampling. Another way of doing a survey, obviously, is a paper modality, and that is that you hand out a paper survey. It's traditional. Folks then complete it, mail it back. The downside to that is, one, it requires a lot of steps on that part of that employee. They have to do the survey, then they have to put it in an envelope or somehow get it back to the third-party vendor, and then that vendor has to code it and key it in, and then the results have to be analyzed. So that's a lot of spots for a breakdown. Probably the most popular way now to do an employee satisfaction survey, and it's pretty inexpensive, is electronically. Most employees have some type of access to the internet at work. They have an email address, and typically what can be done is an employee can get an invitation to take an electronic survey. The beauty with that is that once they take the survey, the data entry's done, they've submitted it, they don't have to put it in a stamped envelope, send it back. But sometimes they do something called the mixed mode for those employees who don't regularly have internet access. And at a hospital, an example might be maybe the maintenance folks don't, just by virtue of their job, they may not have ready access to the internet. So they may get a paper version, whereas all the other staff may get an electronic version. It's the exact same. All of these different modalities are all acceptable. The key is that you really want to get a high participation rate. It's not of value at the end of the day if you do an employee satisfaction survey and you have a low response rate. So, all right. Well, this kind of talks through the process, and it's not meant to overwhelm you, but it's meant to kind of share with you that there is absolutely a defined process when you do employee satisfaction surveying. It typically takes about 4 to 6 weeks to administer. The first step involves obviously finalizing the survey script and the questions. The second then involves launching it, making sure that all the employees are aware that it's happening. And you may do that through posters, through emails, through a company newsletter. More importantly, though, you need to make it very clear that those results will indeed be anonymous and that they are valued. And so those two messages have to be very strong in all the communications you do. Typically, you have to finalize the employee invitee list. You need to determine whether the employee is eligible. Then you launch the survey, you collect the results, you analyze the results, formulate the report. And really, the last step is as important as the very first one. So it's not only important what you ask, but it's what do you do with that data once it comes in. And that is to create an action plan. So I know some some organizations try and truncate this and make it be done quicker, but really to be effective, it takes 4 to 6 weeks. Now maybe with only 45 employees, it could be a little shorter, but you have to really do every single step there to make sure that it's done well. And again, the goal here is to evaluate the culture that currently exists and then create a healthy workplace going forward, right? Change that culture, make sure that it's healthy. Here are some of the key topics that people typically ask in employee surveys. The first would be overall satisfaction. How satisfied are you with the company, with your job? But then specifically, we like to drill down and look at direction. How happy are they with the direction that the organization is going? Do they feel engaged in that? Execution, how well is the company really living up to its mission? How is it executing appropriately? Is it forming plans? And these are all questions that can be asked across departments, regardless of whether or not you work in payroll or whether or not you work in marketing. Those questions work. Connection, how well do employees feel connected to the organization and to each other? It's very important. Obviously, some questions on supervision and working with your supervisor. How well is the supervisor really serving as a coach? Are they managing? What are some issues there? And then you want to ask about the work that the people do. Are they happy with the work they do? Do they? Many times companies overlook the fact that if you want to innovate and change, the best spot to go is the person who's doing the work. You ask them first, and then they'll tell you, well, you've always done it this way, but this would be so much better if we just, moved in this direction. And you forget to ask that individual for that input. And then obviously you ask about pay and benefits. Interestingly, it's very important that pay is not as important as culture in an organization. People will work for a company and receive less pay if they feel valued and if they feel that the company really has the right culture, a healthy culture. Obviously, measuring your engagement is critical. You always have to be pushing employees toward that end of the continuum where folks are fully engaged. And most organizations have partially engaged employees. I mean, it's a bell curve. If we went out and did the survey, you'd definitely see a bell curve. You'd have some folks who are fully engaged, and then you'd have folks who are completely disengaged. And where you really want to work is in that center of that bell curve, and you want to move all of them up. So you really want those partially engaged employees to become more engaged, not more disengaged. You really need to help them understand how valued they are. And moreover, you need to celebrate success. You need to set milestones and actually celebrate little successes. So at the end of the day, an employee satisfaction survey really can turn health into wealth. It can create the right culture for employees. Happy employees really ultimately do mean happy customers, and it's also a wonderful way to measure employee engagement along the way. So they always say that working hard for something we don't care about, that creates stress in our life. But when we work hard for something that we really care about, that creates passion, and that's really what you want to do to create a healthy workplace environment. So I'm kind of quick, I know, but I do want to ask you guys, make this more of a consultative thing. I mean, was this relevant to you? Is it something that you're interested in taking back to your organization?
Yes, we know that we need to do another and do this more often. So that is something that's been discussed. But I do have a question for you. We are in the middle of a union contract negotiations that currently are not going very well. So we had talked that in 2016 that we would do this. It was discussed. But we're concerned that in the environment that we have currently, that it might be a bit skewed. So we're not sure where we stand there. It's with the nurses, obviously, and that's the only union that we have. So we are concerned by that, and we're thinking of putting it off a little while longer until at least the union things are taken care of. But what is your opinion about that?
Well, I'd suggest two approaches. One, I don't know what your collective bargaining team is thinking, but I would suggest you don't put it off. And the main reason is that, again, every day you're not asking those employees their opinion, you're losing their engagement, they're moving the wrong end of the continuum.
Right.
But if possible to move it forward, I would actually ask the collective bargaining team, and particularly the union representatives, explain to them what you want to do, and that it has nothing to do with specifics, and I would maybe take that out of the survey to begin with in terms of specific wage issues or health benefit issues. Take those off the table. Tell them that what we really want to do is we want to create the right culture here, so we want to focus on talking about the work that these individuals are doing today, the direction that they're getting. There's a way to handle that. Now, on the other hand, if you were dealing with something that was very significant, like I know there's a hospital in town that was dealing with senior leadership, was accused of some tough stuff. If that major issue was going on, I'd say hold off. Or if you were about to go into a merger, those are big events. But union negotiations are something that are always going to be ongoing, and I think as long as you can engage the union and let them know, and if the union stewards should be happy to be part of that. They should understand that. So I think it's better to get started. I think you'll get more value out of it if you start it.
Thank you.
And again, I don't know how many, the hope would be is that you could do most of this online. So it's very low cost. I mean, it truly is very low cost if you're able to do it online. If you have to do a paper version or a phone survey, it will cost a little more to do. So, how about you? What are you going to take back to your workplace?
Yeah, we're definitely interested in doing this because we are so small, and departments talk to departments, and since we've never done one before, we're kind of concerned about the mistrust issues and why are they doing this? Do you have suggestions of what's the best way to pitch it to employees of why we're doing this and why now?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think you really need to start by one, kind of laying out from the company perspective that your goal is to create the right culture. The goal is to be transparent, and that this is going to be a journey. Some of you, and acknowledge the fact that some of the employees are going to feel the way they feel regardless of what you, the employer, do. But make it clear that that is not your intent. And then one of the things you can do to help make sure that the information is used well is you can develop teams to, remember we went through those 6 steps of the process? Teams can help monitor those. And I would pick the people on your teams who probably are going to be your naysayers, the ones who, you typically know who they are. Well, I don't trust them on this or whatever. And get them engaged. I mean, the key thing with an employee survey is that it's not going to work unless leadership and management are fully behind it. So if you don't have that, then you absolutely shouldn't start it. So if the distrust is at that level, I would say don't waste your time until you align those folks. But then I would involve your naysayers in the process and focus more on the end game and say, the results will be the results, but I want to help create action plans once it's done. So I know it's a tough thing, it's so funny. I wish I could have some folks here who getting them to do it the first time was the hardest hurdle, and then once it was done, they say, "Oh my goodness, it's great. We were talking about lunch and learns and how people don't all want to learn how to deal with access software programs, and whoever thought that the central supply people wanted to learn access software, but we now do lunch and learns and everybody gets together." And so it's just funny how, but it's hard to say that because you're at the front of the journey, you're not at the back, but I can assure you that it's well worth the effort. But the key, I'm going to close with 2 key things. One is don't get on the treadmill if you're not willing to put in the 30 minutes. I mean, once you get on it, you have to move forward with it. So don't do it and then not do it again. And then the other is don't be afraid to hear what the employees have to say. And you may supplement a survey by doing focus groups, little discussion groups with key people. You may want to do, some in-depth interviews with some key people, particularly if departments are having issues. And then the other thing is and I think we might even be able to help you if you're at all interested, is get you names of companies that we know do employee satisfaction surveys and talk to them, because they will probably be the folks who can deal with the objections or the barriers you're dealing with best. So, but really, the tie back to today is that really this is health. The corporate environment that you work in. And, I always joke at my company, I say my company does really well despite me, because I've got some wonderful people, and I have to say that the culture, it's just fun to come into work there. And I believe it's genuine. In fact, I know people who have joined us and didn't quite fit in. And, it isn't for everyone, and they moved on because it just wasn't going to work. We know pretty early on. And when you're in a small company, we only have 27 employees, so we're even smaller than you, and it's tight. So, well, thank you. I enjoyed sharing with you my insights today.